I laughed when the process server handed me those papers, not because anything was funny, but because of the titanium rod in my spine that had kept me flat on my back for the past 4 months. My hands trembled as I read the first line: Notice of legal action, harassment, and stalking. My ex-wife, Patricia, was suing me for following her across Ontario, showing up at her workplace in Ottawa, her sister's cottage in Muskoka, and outside her physiotherapy clinic in Kingston. The dates were all there, precise and damning, March through June 2024. The same months I'd been recovering from spinal fusion surgery in Toronto General Hospital. My name is Robert Harrison. I'm 63 years old, and until that lawsuit landed in my lap, I thought the worst chapter of my life was already written. My construction company had collapsed 3 years prior, when our largest client went bankrupt, owing us $840,000. The domino effect destroyed everything: the business, the house in Oakville, my 28-year marriage to Patricia, and eventually my health. The stress had compressed my vertebrae so badly that by last February I could barely stand. Surgery was the only option, but here's what made that lawsuit so absurd. It was almost funny. During every single date Patricia claimed I'd been stalking her, I'd been in a hospital bed on the 7th floor of Toronto General, unable to walk more than 10 feet without collapsing. My surgeon, Dr. Patel, had been very clear about the recovery timeline: 12 weeks minimum before attempting stairs, 16 weeks before driving. The lawsuit arrived in week 17. I called my lawyer, Graham Chen, immediately. Graham had handled my bankruptcy proceedings and knew the whole ugly story of my divorce. When I read him the allegations over the phone, there was a long pause. "Robert, this is actually good news," he said finally. "Good news? My ex-wife is accusing me of criminal harassment. Good news because you have ironclad proof. You couldn't have done it. Hospital records, nursing logs, security footage. You were monitored 24/7 for 4 months. This case will be dismissed in 5 minutes." I wanted to believe him, but Graham hadn't seen what I'd seen in the envelope. Patricia had included photographs, 12 of them, printed in color. In each one, a man who looked disturbingly like me stood in the background. Same height, about 6'1", same build, though I'd lost weight during recovery. Same receding gray hairline, same wire-rimmed glasses I'd worn for 15 years. In one photo, taken outside a Starbucks in Ottawa, the man was even wearing a navy windbreaker identical to one I owned. "She has pictures, Graham. Someone who looks exactly like me." Another pause. "Email them to me. We'll deal with this. In the meantime, start documenting everything. Pull your hospital records, visitor logs, everything." I spent that evening going through my phone, every text message, every call log, every email from February through June. My daughter, Amy, had visited twice a week. My son, Michael, had flown in from Vancouver once. My brother, Thomas, had come by every Sunday. Beyond that, my social circle, during those months, had consisted entirely of nurses, physiotherapists, and the elderly man in the next bed who watched game shows at full volume. The lawsuit demanded $200,000 in damages for emotional distress and requested a restraining order. The court date was set for August 15th, 6 weeks away. Patricia's lawyer had filed in Ottawa, 3 hours from my apartment in Toronto. Just traveling there would be agonizing with my back. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from pain, though there was plenty of that, from the sheer wrongness of it all. Patricia and I had our problems. Certainly, the business failure had poisoned everything between us. She blamed me for not having better contracts, for trusting the wrong people, for losing the comfortable life she'd grown accustomed to. By the time she filed for divorce, we could barely be in the same room. But stalking, harassment, that wasn't me. That had never been me. I went back through the photos with a magnifying glass. In the Ottawa Starbucks shot, the man's face was partially visible in profile. The resemblance was uncanny. Same nose, same jawline, but something felt off the way he stood, shoulders slightly hunched forward. I'd spent months in physio, learning to stand straight to protect my spine. This man's posture was all wrong. The next morning, I called Toronto General's Records Department. Getting copies of everything took 3 days and $200 in administrative fees, but it was worth it. 416 pages documenting every minute of my hospital stay. Admission on February 12th at 6 a.m. Surgery lasting 9 hours. Post-op complications, with infection requiring extended ICU stay. Transfer to recovery ward on February 28th. Discharge on June 8th, exactly 117 days after admission. The nursing logs were particularly detailed. Every 4 hours, a nurse had checked on me, recorded vital signs, medication administration, meals consumed. I'd been on a morphine drip for the first 3 weeks, couldn't have walked to the bathroom unassisted for 6 weeks, and hadn't left the hospital floor until week 14, when I'd been wheeled down for a CT scan. Graham reviewed everything and scheduled a call with Patricia's lawyer, a woman named Judith Brennan. I listened on speakerphone as Graham laid out our defense. Miss Brennan, my client was hospitalized during every date mentioned in your complaint. We have comprehensive medical records proving he was physically incapable of being in Ottawa, Muskoka, or Kingston during those months. Judith's voice was sharp. Mr. Chen, we have photographic evidence and eyewitness testimony. 6 different people confirmed seeing Mr. Harrison at these locations. 6 people identified someone who looked like my client. There's a significant difference. The photographs are quite clear, and I should mention, we also have records of concerning phone calls to my client during this period, calls from Mr. Harrison's cell phone number. My stomach dropped. I'd called Patricia exactly twice during my hospital stay, once to inform her about the surgery, once to tell her I'd survived it. Both conversations had lasted less than 2 minutes and been purely informational. What calls? I asked, breaking my silence. Mr. Harrison? Lovely to hear from you, Judith said, her tone dripping sarcasm. My client received 17 calls from your number between March and June. She wisely chose not to answer any of them. Your voicemails were disturbing. That's impossible. Check the phone records. I made 2 calls to Patricia in 4 months. We have her phone records, Mr. Harrison. They tell a different story. After the call ended, Graham looked troubled. We need to get your phone records immediately, and we need to figure out who this look-alike is. You believe me, right, that I didn't make those calls? I believe the hospital records, but someone went to considerable effort to make it look like you. This isn't random harassment, this is targeted. I requested my phone records from Rogers that afternoon. While waiting for them to arrive, I started thinking about who might want to frame me. The business bankruptcy had created plenty of enemies, subcontractors who'd lost money, suppliers who'd been left holding bad debts, even former employees who'd lost their jobs. But 3 years had passed. Why come after me now, through Patricia? Then I remembered something. During one of Amy's visits in April, she'd mentioned that Patricia had a new boyfriend, someone she'd met at her book club in February, right before my surgery. Amy hadn't met him, but said Patricia seemed happier than she'd been in years. What was his name? I'd asked at the time. Dennis something. Dennis Maxwell, I think. I pulled out my laptop and searched Dennis Maxwell, Ottawa, nothing relevant. I tried Dennis Maxwell, Toronto, still nothing. I was about to give up when I had another thought. What if he wasn't from here? What if Patricia had met him online, not at book club? I logged into Facebook for the first time in months and searched Patricia's friends list. There he was, Dennis Maxwell, profile picture, showed a man in his late 50s, graying hair, slim build, standing in front of the Rio Canal. I clicked through to his photos. My blood went cold. Dennis Maxwell looked like he could be my brother. Not identical, but close enough. Same height, based on the photos, similar features, similar style of glasses. He even wore his hair the same way, what was left of it. I took screenshots and sent them to Graham immediately, then called him. Tell me I'm not crazy. Look at this guy. That's concerning, very concerning. Where did you find him? He's Patricia's new boyfriend. She met him right before my surgery. Graham was quiet for a moment. This might not be a coincidence, Robert, but we need to be careful. We can't just accuse him without proof. Do you know anything else about him? Just his name and that he lives in Ottawa. Let me do some digging. In the meantime, your phone records should arrive tomorrow. That'll tell us a lot. The phone records came via email the next morning. I printed all 68 pages and went through them line by line. The calls to Patricia that Judith mentioned weren't there. According to Rogers, I'd made exactly 2 calls to Patricia's number, March 3rd at 2:47 p.m. Duration, 1 minute, 43 seconds. March 4th at 9:12 a.m. Duration, 2 minutes, 6 seconds. Nothing else. I called Graham immediately. The calls don't exist. According to my records, I only called her twice. That means someone spoofed your number, made it look like the calls were coming from you when they weren't. That's actually easier to prove than you'd think. We can get call detail records from the cell towers. If you were in the hospital and the calls originated from Ottawa, we've got them. Why would someone do this? Why go to all this trouble? That's what we need to find out. I've got a private investigator friend, Marcus Webb, former RCMP. I think we should bring him in. Marcus Webb met me at a Tim Hortons near my apartment 2 days later. He was a large man, maybe 55, with the careful movements of someone who'd seen things that left marks. I showed him everything, the lawsuit, the photos, Dennis Maxwell's Facebook profile, my phone records, my hospital documentation. He studied the photographs for a long time, occasionally pulling out a jeweler's loupe to examine details. This is sophisticated, he said finally. These aren't snapshots. Look at the angles, the lighting. Whoever took these knew what they were doing. They wanted clear, usable images. You think someone hired a photographer? I think someone planned this very carefully. Tell me about Dennis Maxwell. I told him what little I knew. Marcus made notes and promised to do a full background check. 3 days later, he called me back. Dennis Maxwell doesn't exist, he said. What do you mean? I saw his Facebook page. You saw a Facebook page created 11 months ago. Profile picture is stock photography from a modeling agency in Toronto. The other photos are stolen from various social media accounts. Dennis Maxwell is a fake identity. My mind reeled. So, who is he? Who's Patricia dating? That's the interesting question. I contacted some friends in Ottawa law enforcement, asked them to quietly check if Patricia's been seen with anyone matching the description. They found something. A man named Kevin Dutton, age 58, has a record, 2 prior stalking charges in British Columbia. Both cases settled out of court, moved to Ontario last year. Jesus Christ, Patricia's dating a stalker. It appears so, and get this, Dutton looks nothing like the guy in these photos, or like you. He's 5'7", heavy build, full head of dark hair, but he's got experience with surveillance, with harassment, with manipulating situations. The pieces started clicking together, but the picture they formed made no sense. Why would he frame me for stalking Patricia if he's the one dating her? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Maybe she doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe he's playing both of you. Stalkers are often obsessive and paranoid. They see threats everywhere. You're the ex-husband. In his mind, you're competition. but I've been in a hospital bed, which makes you the perfect target. You can't defend yourself. You can't investigate. He probably thought you'd just settle, pay her the money, and disappear from her life permanently. We need to tell Patricia. She needs to know what kind of person she's with. Not yet. If we tip him off, he'll disappear. What we need is proof he's the one in these photos, and I think I know how to get it. Marcus's plan was simple but risky. He wanted to do surveillance on Kevin Dutton, see if he'd make another move. In the meantime, Graham filed our response to the lawsuit, including all my hospital records and the discrepancies in the phone records. He also filed a motion requesting cell tower data for the alleged calls to Patricia. The response clearly rattled them. Judith Brennan called Graham 2 days later requesting a meeting. We met at her office in Ottawa, a glass tower overlooking the Ottawa River. Patricia was there looking older than I remembered, harder somehow. Judith sat beside her, and across the table, a man I'd never seen before. 5'7", heavy build, dark hair, Kevin Dutton. "This is my client's partner, Mr. Dutton," Judith said. "He's been helping support her through this difficult time." I kept my face neutral, but my heart was pounding. This was the man who'd been impersonating me, stalking Patricia, while making it look like I was doing it. And he was sitting right across from me, playing the supportive boyfriend. Graham laid out our defense methodically: hospital records, nursing logs, security footage of me in the recovery ward, phone records showing only 2 calls, the impossibility of me being in multiple cities while bedridden. Patricia's face went pale as the evidence mounted. She kept glancing at Kevin, but he maintained a concerned, supportive expression. "Miss Brennan," Graham said, "someone went to considerable effort to make it appear my client was stalking Miss C's Harrison. Someone who looks similar to him. Someone who spoofed his phone number. This isn't a case of mistaken identity. This is identity fraud and criminal harassment, but not by my client." "That's absurd," Judith said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Is it? We'd like to request that all parties submit to forensic analysis, including Mr. Dutton here. If someone's impersonating my client, surely you'd want to find out who." Kevin's expression finally cracked, just for a second, a flash of something dark. "I don't see why I'd need to submit to anything," he said. "I'm not the one being accused of stalking." "No," I said, speaking directly to him for the first time, "but you are the one who did it." The room erupted. Judith demanded we retract the accusation. Patricia looked between Kevin and me, confused and frightened. Kevin stood up, face flushed. "I don't have to listen to this. Patricia, we're leaving." But Marcus Webb chose that moment to enter the conference room. He'd been waiting outside, and Graham had texted him our signal. He placed a folder on the table. Kevin Dutton, also known as Kevin Marshall, also known as Dennis Maxwell, wanted in British Columbia on 2 counts of aggravated stalking, violated a restraining order in Vancouver last year, and he placed a photograph on the table. Photographed 3 days ago, entering a costume shop in Ottawa, where he purchased a gray wig and wire-rimmed glasses. Patricia gasped. Kevin bolted for the door, but Marcus was faster. In 3 steps, he had Kevin against the wall, arm twisted behind his back, through the glass wall of the conference room. I could see 2 Ottawa police officers entering the office. "Patricia didn't know," Kevin said as the officers cuffed him. "She had nothing to do with this. I was protecting her from you. You're the threat. You're the one who—" "I was in a hospital bed," I said quietly, "for 4 months." The full story came out over the next few weeks. Kevin Dutton had indeed created the Dennis Maxwell persona to get close to Patricia. He'd researched her online, found out about her divorce, positioned himself as exactly the kind of man she'd fall for after years with me, stable, attentive, seemingly successful. But Kevin had a pathological jealousy of anyone from his target's past lives. He'd done it before in BC, driving one woman's ex-boyfriend to attempt suicide with relentless harassment made to look like it came from the woman herself. When he learned about my surgery, he'd seen an opportunity, make me look like a stalker, while I was physically helpless to defend myself, drive a permanent wedge between Patricia and me, make sure I'd never be part of her life again. He'd hired a photographer friend from Vancouver, someone who owed him money to follow Patricia and photograph moments where I could be seen in the background. The photographer had worn a wig, glasses, clothes similar to mine. They'd coordinated it all via encrypted messaging apps, thought they'd been clever. The phone spoofing had been even simpler. Services exist online that let you make calls from fake numbers. Kevin had used my number to leave increasingly disturbing voicemails to Patricia, playing the part of an obsessed ex-husband. Patricia had saved them all, which the police confiscated as evidence. At Kevin's apartment, investigators found a wall covered in photographs of Patricia, hundreds of them, going back months before they'd supposedly met. Surveillance notes, her schedule, her routines, her favorite places. He'd been stalking her long before he'd introduced himself at that book club. The criminal charges against Kevin piled up: identity theft, criminal harassment, fraud, and when they dug deeper, violations of restraining orders from British Columbia. His bail was set at $100,000, which he couldn't make. Patricia came to see me 3 weeks after Kevin's arrest. I was doing physiotherapy at a clinic near my apartment, slowly rebuilding strength. She waited until my session finished, then asked if we could talk. We went to a quiet corner of the waiting room. She looked exhausted. "I'm dropping the lawsuit," she said. "Obviously, and I'm sorry, Robert. I'm so sorry. I should have known you wouldn't. You're not that kind of person." But the photos, the calls, it all seemed so real. He was very convincing. I feel so stupid. He knew exactly what to say, what I wanted to hear, and all the while, he was... She started crying, despite everything. I felt sorry for her. She'd been manipulated just as much as I had, maybe more. "Patricia, this wasn't your fault. He's done this before. He's a professional at manipulation." The police said he'd been watching me for months before we met. Months, Robert, learning everything about me, planning it all out. That's so violating. We talked for an hour, really talked for the first time in years. She told me about the fear she'd felt thinking I was following her, the way it had made her feel unsafe in her own city. I told her about the betrayal of being accused while lying helpless in a hospital bed, unable to defend myself. "What's going to happen to him?" she asked. "Graham says he's looking at serious prison time, between the violations from BC and what he did here. Probably 8 to 10 years. She nodded slowly. "Good, that's good. People should be protected from people like him." The lawsuit was formally dropped in September. Graham filed a countersuit against Kevin for defamation, identity theft, and emotional distress. We'll probably never see any money from it, but it's on his record. Patricia moved to her sister's cottage in Muskoka, temporarily, needed space from Ottawa and all the memories there. We exchange occasional texts now. Nothing deep, just checking in. The marriage is over, and we'll stay that way, but we're not enemies anymore. We survived something together, even if we didn't know we were in it together at the time. My back is slowly improving. I'm up to walking 40 minutes a day now, starting to think about what comes next, maybe teaching construction management at a community college, something that uses my experience without destroying what's left of my spine. The whole experience taught me something important that I wish I'd understood years ago. When someone's trying to destroy your reputation, the truth might not be immediately obvious to others, but it's your most powerful weapon. Documentation, evidence, facts, these things matter more than emotions or assumptions. Patricia believed Kevin because he gave her something that felt true. But feeling true isn't the same as being true. I also learned that predators, like Kevin, count on their victims being isolated and unable to defend themselves. He chose me as a target because I was in a hospital bed because he thought I'd be powerless. What he didn't count on was that even from that bed, I could still gather evidence, could still build a defense, could still find people like Graham and Marcus who believed in the truth. And here's something I tell young people now when I get the chance. Technology can be weaponized against you, your phone number spoofed, photos doctored, your identity stolen. But that same technology also creates records, digital trails, cell tower pings, timestamps that don't lie. In my case, the hospital's electronic monitoring system, the cell phone records, the security cameras, all of that saved me. The digital age makes certain kinds of harassment easier, but it also makes the truth harder to hide. I'm still rebuilding my life at 63, still recovering, still processing what happened, but I'm here. I'm free, and my name is clear. Kevin Dutton is facing justice, and Patricia is safe from him. Sometimes the system works, but only if you fight for yourself, document everything, and refuse to accept false accusations, no matter how convincing they might seem to others. Truth has a weight to it that lies can't match, not in the long run. You just have to be strong enough to hold on until that weight tips the scales in your direction. And that titanium rod, in my spine, it's a permanent reminder that even when life breaks you down, proper support and enough time can make you strong enough to stand again.